Greetings, salutations, and welcome. Not to the Kreeger cast alone, but to After Action. And today I have my first non-Matt guest.
That's so sad.
Chris Gillen.
What up? Glad to be back.
We're also, while we did not watch a B-movie, we watched something B-movie adjacent.
I mean, sort of. In terms of, like, probably the budget and because of how early it was made, it's probably, like, the equivalent of a modern B-movie, but
I don't know. This is, like, this to me is, like, all the B-movies I watch, but better. I was joking around with you during it that it's, like, the absolute best knockoff Bond movie I've ever seen.
yeah.
And it's a James Bond film, like it actually is.
Sure. So, we watched Dr. No.
The first
of the James Bond films. I am a huge James Bond fan. I've seen all the movies.
Before we get too deep, watch, don't watch.
Watch.
Okay.
I'm
in
must.
agreement with you.
It's a must. You can't call yourself a Bond fan if you haven't seen Dr. No. And I get a lot of pushback from people about my opinions on Bond. Mostly because I don't know, our society has this weird obsession with the first edition of a thing being the best of it. And so people always say that Sean Connery is the best Bond. And I may get a lot of flack for this, but I don't care. I don't agree with that. I don't. And the reason is because the first Bond I ever experienced was Roger Moore. And that's what I've always equated Bond to. And I think that Roger Moore is a little, like, more of the tongue-in-cheek sort of styling that the Bond books were written as, rather than, like, not that the Sean Connery Bond films are, like, more action-y than those. I just like Roger Moore as a personality more than Sean Connery. But I will say that, even though Connery's not my favorite Bond, you have to watch pretty much all the Connery Bond films. They lay the groundwork for the entire just pantheon of Bond. I mean, everybody's familiar with Bond because of this movie.
I'm only familiar with Daniel Craig and now Sean Connery. I've almost seen as many Connery as Craig films.
Craig's having seen one of them.
Yeah.
I've seen them all. I'm a huge Bond fan. I've read all the books. I've seen all the movies. I've seen all the movies more than once. I don't choose to watch any of the Connery films more than once, except for Dr. No. That's how good I think it is.
How many times do you think you've seen No?
More than 5, less than 10.
Is it your number one film?
Stop.
The Bond series?
Stop. So bad. No, it's not my number one film. In fact, it's probably not even my number 2 film.
In the Bond series?
In the Bond series.
How many Bond films are there again?
24, 25, 26.
That is a god-awful amount of films.
Every single book that Ian Fleming wrote... Let me rephrase that. Every single fiction book that Ian Fleming wrote was turned into a film. That is all the Bond films and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And apparently he wrote some other non-fiction books that were like, I don't even know what they are, like Histories of the British Monarchy or something like that. I don't know.
Don't worry, they'll be turned into a film next summer.
Never looked into them. But yeah, all of the Bond books and all of the Bond short stories too have been turned into films as well. Casino Royale was a short story.
Yeah.
I think there's been a couple other ones that weren't like feature-length books.
How long was this film and when did it come out?
And
do we know its budget?
Came out in 1962? God, I should know this.
I was going to say, typically, the way these after actions work is we say a brief description, like...
1962.
We say when it was made, roughly what it cost if we know that. And it's IMDb description.
I don't know if... I don't know what the budget was, but I know the budget was low. It was a pretty low budget film. And it's not immediately obvious that it's a low budget film, and I think that's like kind of what makes it so good, is that like compared to say the Daniel Craig era films, which, you know, happened in, I think Casino Royale came out in like 2006 or 2007 or something like that, through Skyfall in 2012. Those movies are, I mean, they're James Bond. They're sitting on 50 years worth of, you know, the legend.
Yeah.
And they had massive budgets. And in my opinion, they're not any better. In fact, they're worse.
I would agree with that.
Because Bond got really dark in the...
Unnecessarily so.
Right, but, well, I think it has a little more to do with, like, just the scene that is Hollywood now. Whereas, like, even in, like, you know, big budget, like,
Superman
summer blockbusters, you have to have, like, grit. And apparently we've made, like, super washed out darkness artsy now. Like, that's a thing that's in film. The Bond movies didn't need that. They didn't need that. And it's no fault of Daniel Craig's. I actually think Daniel Craig is a very good actor in everything else he's ever done. It's definitely the fault of the writers and the producers who are like, we should make this really dark and Bond's going to have all these crises and all these main characters are going to die. Whereas, like, you actually saw, like, one good guy die in this film.
So, I actually want to make a few comments, just real quick. One, this is the highest rated film on IMDb that has ever been reviewed by After Action.
That's unsurprising.
It is also the longest film we've ever reviewed at 110 minutes.
Wow, that's actually a lot longer than I thought it was.
It is the lowest rated film in terms of its guidance rating. It's a PG film, which I'm kind of shocked by. There wasn't...
Well, yeah,
no one bleeds, but there is aftermath of blood and there's killing. I don't like that this is like the same rating as like Kids Next Door.
Yeah, I mean, PG is kind of surprising. But also it was the 60s and like ratings were different back then.
I don't even know if this is before the MPAA.
I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
I think it was totally Halloween that caused the MPAA.
Which I just watched on Halloween last week.
I'm pretty certain that's what caused it.
You want to talk about terrible films? Let's watch Halloween.
We can watch Halloween, but we'll save that for Halloween. So, I do want to read the brief description because we normally do read those before we get into it.
Okay,
so,
go ahead.
A resourceful British government agent seeks answers in the case involving the disappearance of a colleague and the disruption of the American space program.
That's it?
That is it. That is the IMDb description of Dr. No.
That doesn't give away a lot. All right, so what happens in Dr. No? First of all, James Bond isn't in the movie for about the first 10 minutes.
This is true. We only hear someone ask for him, but that's like really close.
And then it's still another like a good 2 minutes of screen time before you see Sean Connery on the screen. And then he says his name after that. But like the camera pans to him, or camera cuts to him, I guess, and then the Bond theme song starts playing. So like you're supposed to know. Anyway, what happens in the movie is... Are we doing this?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to spoil anything.
I was going to say, when we do the watch, don't watch, that's supposed to be our cutoff for the spoilers. And, you know, if people want to go watch it based on our uninformed opinions, they can. So,
yeah, absolutely go watch it.
We've done that. We've done that.
So, a MI6 operative is killed in Jamaica.
And his assistant woman.
Yeah. And you don't know why. They never really explain that, except for, like, later in the movie, kind of. Yeah. And then they send Bond, MI6 sends Bond, after making a big deal about introducing a new gun to him, the Walther PP, which is predecessor to the PPK? I actually have no idea.
They ran alongside each other. The PP is Police Pistola, and then PPK is Police Pistola Kurz, short. They were making a comment about him carrying a Beretta, which I'm going to assume is one of the little pocket Berettas from the early, between the 1920s and 1950s. And that shoots a .32 caliber cartridge, which takes about 7 shots on average to stop a man. And so they do make that comment.
Right, they do make a comment that it doesn't have any stopping power.
Yeah.
Or has the stopping power of a lady's handbag or something. I think that's the line that he says.
He says, it's very light, perfect for a lady's handbag. Yeah. Which it is, because 9 times out of 10, you get shot and you do the gentlemanly thing and stop attempting to rape someone.
Yeah, fair enough.
But then he gets his Walther. They don't make the comment if it's a PPK or a PP, but based on the silhouette, it seems to be a PP. Both shoot the 9mm short. Though you can get a PPK in .32 ACP as well, but
not relevant.
Not relevant.
Save that for another podcast. Anyway, they send Bond to Jamaica. He goes down there, does some spycraft where he suspects that he's not being picked up at the airport by the people who were supposed to pick him up at the airport or weren't supposed to.
Yeah, no one sent him a car, but there was a car waiting for him.
So then they get in a car chase, and he tells the guy to turn off the road, and then...
In a beautiful 50s era Chevy.
Yeah.
I think it is just a 57 Chevy.
Looks good, man. Then tries to interrogate that guy, but he takes cyanide or something.
Yeah, he has a cyanide tablet in the cigarette.
Then Bond shows up at the hotel and does some more spycrafty stuff. Then we get to the good stuff, where he introduces the American agent.
Yeah.
Felix Leiter.
That we see after a gratuitous amount of red stripe.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of product placement in this movie, and I feel like it's because of the low budget. They were like, we need an extra injection of cash. Because every beer bottle and every liquor bottle is the label is clearly faced towards the camera.
So I actually have a couple of questions about that. One, did they actually get sponsorship? If they did, is that why they put it in Jamaica?
We'd have to look it up. And no, the book is set in Jamaica. Okay. So that's why. But they went after... I'm sure they went after Red Stripe to be like, hey, we're going to be there anyway. Because, so there's a scene where Bond's in like a bar or cantina type thing. And he's leaning against the bar, but not... The camera angle is not straight onto him and then straight into the back wall, and yet every Red Stripe label is turned precisely to that angle that the camera is at.
So that's got to be product placement.
And then there's another scene when he walks into his hotel room, and the guy is making him a martini, which we need to talk about. The martini theme. About that. And the Smirnoff bottle is very obviously turned towards the camera.
This is true. But I originally thought that the Red Stripe was more about setting the scene as being in Jamaica. Because as we all know, Red Stripe is Jamaican for beer.
Correct. They do never really do a good job of setting up that you're in Jamaica. I mean, like, the first 10 minutes of the film when they're showing the MI6 operative being killed, they never say Jamaica. They never show Jamaica. Yeah. There's nothing Jamaican about the thing, except that there are, like, some palm trees around, and there are British people, and that literally, at the time, could have been anywhere in the world.
Yeah, when I saw, I hate to say this, but when I saw British people and black people, like, interacting like that, my knee-jerk was South Africa.
Right, which is not an unreasonable assumption. Yeah, they don't say Jamaica until, like, at least 5 or 6 minutes into the film when after the people are killed, and then they're like, oh, the line in Kingston went dead, and you're just supposed to know that Kingston is in Jamaica.
They do actually say Jamaica.
Do they do?
Okay. Yeah, the guy first says, like, I'm not getting anything back from the Jamaican operatives. And then they have that. They say,
okay. But whatever. You're just supposed to know that it's Kingston, Jamaica, and you never really... They say it when Bond finally shows up, and the M is telling him, I'm sending you to Kingston. You're on the next flight to Kingston or whatever like that. And you're like, okay, that's where it's in Jamaica. But they never really tell you that until that moment.
That's another weird thing. Moneypenny.
Yeah.
It's weird seeing her young.
Mm-hmm.
At least for me.
Right?
Having, only known her from the Craig films.
She is quite attractive as well in 1962.
Indeed.
Yeah. Those are pretty much every woman in this film. Gotta be honest. There's like Ursula Andress is clearly the Bond girl. I mean, she's the female lead in the film, but like there are several Bond girls in this movie.
Yeah, like you could not remake this film today and have it be anything but a B movie. No major studio would greenlight this script.
Right. No, it's terrible.
No, I don't mean that it's terrible.
The dialogue in this movie is awful. It's so bad. But here's the thing: is it's bad because the world that we live in, that we grew up having like movies in, like you couldn't say those lines. They just wouldn't fit in like a modern Bond film. And the reason for that is, one, because some of them are really cheeky and there's some really corny jokes in there. Not that there aren't those, like Daniel Craig has some of those lines, but the movies themselves are overall too dark for comic relief, basically. Whereas these movies are supposed to be not lighthearted, but like they're not supposed to be dark. They're not supposed to be gritty. They're supposed to have jokes, and they're supposed to be funny things happening.
It's a spy adventure, not a spy drama.
Right. There's a line when there's a car chase in the film, and Bond goes under a crane or something, and the other car spins off a cliff and explodes, which is, Patrick literally laughed out loud when the car exploded, when the fire started in the car.
Because it started burning before it even hit anything. It was just going along normally down the hill.
Bumping downhill, and then all of a sudden it exploded and there was fire everywhere. It's hilarious. So obviously it's these people trying to kill Bond, and then so this construction worker comes over and looks down the edge of the cliff, and he says, like, did you see what happened, or something like that, and Bond goes, they must have been on their way to a funeral. Which
it works on so many levels, because they were driving a hearse.
They were driving a hearse too, yeah, that's like, it's a major part of the joke. But like, those lines are so prevalent in the early Bond films, in both the Connery movies and in the Roger Moore movies, and became like less and less common in the Pierce Brosnan, and then they basically don't exist at all in the Daniel Craig films.
One thing I want to point out is that I've been watching a ton of shark films, so I'm sorry if I can't get this straight, whether it's Shark Attack or Shark Attack 2. Because I've just watched way too many of them in the last few days. But I want to point out that one of those two films had a much better car chase scene.
That's fair. Car chase scene in this movie is pretty bad. But also, again, the budget was super low.
Yeah.
They did have a great Bond car. Probably my favorite Bond car. It's called a Sunbeam Alpine, and I just think it looks fantastic. The classic like Aston Martin DB5 look didn't get introduced until Goldfinger, I think, which was the third Bond film.
$1 million.
What?
Sorry.
That was the budget?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
Yeah, $1 million in 1963, but it brought back in $59 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is massive. Part of that being Ursula Andress. I mean, nobody really knew who she was, and then until the famous bikini scene. And I literally spent the entire movie, I've been trying to find, I've heard before, I think I've heard before, or I was told, or I read something, that this movie was the first movie that a woman wore a bikini in, but actually when I've been trying to find it all day, and we sat down to start recording, and I found it. So that thing that I just said is apparently not true. It's not the first time someone was in a movie wearing a bikini. That would be Bridget Bardot in let's see, what is it called? Menina, the Girl in the Bikini, which came out in 1952. And during the 53 Cannes Film Festival, she apparently, like, was photographed on the beach in France wearing a bikini. And it sort of, like, was, like, a really famous or controversy type thing. So Bridget Bardot is, like, one of the women who's credited with bringing the popularity of the bikini. But the scene of Ursula Andress coming out of the water in the white bikini is, like,
it's
universally regarded as, like, one of the most iconic moments in film, and it is for sure, because of that scene, bikini sales skyrocketed. I mean, she basically, almost single-handedly, made the bikini popular overnight. And she actually said that she pretty much only has a career because of it. She said something to the effect of, like, after that scene, I could pick and choose any role in any film that I wanted for the rest of my career. It is absolutely iconic.
So
it was so iconic that it's actually been redone twice in subsequent Bond films.
I was going to say I've seen it before in other Bond
Once,
films. Halle
Berry almost exactly recreates it, except she's wearing orange. And then in... this is actually really interesting, which I really liked. They had Daniel Craig recreate it. So it's Daniel Craig coming out of the water instead of the Bond girl.
That's kind of funny.
I think that was in Casino Royale. But it's, like, almost the exact same scene. Because Ursula Andress is coming out of the water, like, collecting shells. And she has this, like, old school, like, scuba mask on. And that's what Daniel Craig is wearing.
So I do want to point out a couple things. They did have tie-ins with drink companies, tobacco companies, men clothing companies, and car companies. So I want to say something kind of funny. I don't think Marlboro wanted to be associated with cyanide. Remember, kids, smoking kills. I do think it's really funny, though, that they made a big deal about the guy's cigarettes being Marlboros. They don't say it, but they show the packaging. Show it. So I just thought that was funny. So, yeah. I don't know. I do have to say... Oh, that's interesting, too. It was a part of a double bill with The Young and the Brave.
Never heard
in the United States. Another good film from what I've heard. But anyway, I just think that's interesting that it did kind of start off as this low budget. I also described it when we were watching it as the best B movie I've ever seen. Like, it really is everything I love about schlocky films done well. Like, done with skill and craft and care. The camera work is beautiful. We were watching it on a 1080p screen, but on a DVD, which is 480p. But with 480p, if you film it right and you codex it right and you do all that stuff good, 480p can look great. There's a reason why people put up with it. And the reason is if you do it right, it looks good. So the people filming this movie really knew what they were doing. And you even pointed out the day for night shots look great. They don't really look day for night. They don't look nighttime, but man, they look good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the only other film of the era that did day for night as well is The Great Escape.
Ooh.
Which takes place... The climax of the movie takes place entirely at night, and that was filmed very well.
That's another one we should do.
We should do. That came out in 60... I think it was the year before. I think it was 61. Maybe 60.
Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good film.
Yeah, it was a good one. Let's go back to the plot.
Okay.
So Bond, after the car chase, Bond, let me say this. The car chase was set up by, like, the secretary of the place that he was at. He went and met with somebody.
Yeah.
And then he was, like, hitting on the hot secretary.
Yeah.
But she was part of the evil organization.
I think she was the secretary of the geologist lab.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
And so he says like, why don't you show me around the island or something like that, trying to be all cheeky swab Bond because that's what he does.
Yeah.
Which Connery does very well. And then there's a scene where she is scantily clad and calls him on the phone or something, or he calls her and she says, come pick me up in my house in the mountains. And that's how and then she off screen apparently calls these people and say, hey, Bond will be, in the car at this time. So Bond shows up to her house and she's having just gotten out of the shower and wearing only a towel and clearly surprised to see him. And then this doesn't really make sense at all, but like the evil organization calls the house and she answers it, and then they have sex twice. There's literally nothing, like there's nothing in between those two things. It just goes from like her hanging up the phone, Bond walks into the room, then they have sex. Then they show them after she's like painting her nails. Then they have sex again. Or he calls a taxi.
Yeah.
And then they have sex again. And when the taxi shows up, they're all dressed to the nines or whatever. But it turns out that it's a police car and he just throws her in it.
Yep.
And then proceeds to sit down in her house and set up an ambush.
Yep.
For the geologist guy.
Yep.
Okay. But there's there's nothing in between her hanging up the phone and then they just have sex. So that's because Bond.
Why not?
Animal magnetism, man. He's irresistible.
It is hilarious how much, though, Bond just gets away by luck in this film.
Yeah, so that kind of starts, like, at this point, right? Like, the car chase is sort of that, like, okay, like, yeah, there's some twists and turns and maybe it takes a little bit of driving skill, but really he gets lucky that there's a big-ass crane blocking the road that his small car fits under, but the thing that's chasing him doesn't. And instead of just stopping, those guys drive off a cliff. Also,
a bit of luck way earlier in the film, when he was doing the first car chase where he doesn't know he's being followed by the CIA.
Right.
There's that whole issue with he could have totally killed the CIA agent just because of a misunderstanding.
Right.
But he had the luck not to.
Right. So the geologist guy shows up because he hears that the assistant's been arrested or whatever. He gives up the plot like any good bad guy and then tries to shoot Bond, but he's not Rain Man. He forgets how many bullets are in his gun, and then Bond shoots him.
Which is funny because, going to world history here, ever since the English gun trials of 1901 or 1902, all semi-automatic firearms in use by modern militaries have an unloaded chamber indicator. So typically what that means is the slide racks back on an empty chamber. So, no, his gun should have stayed open.
Yeah.
But that's beside the point.
Doesn't matter. Bond kills the guy. Then...
By the way, it was 1900.
Okay, fair enough. Bond kills the guy, and then he goes and gets his Jamaican buddy, who's like actually working with the CIA, and the CIA agent, Felix.
I've been trying to come up with who can I call discount who in this, and the best...
There's no discount anybody in Bond films. Everybody else is discount Bond characters.
I agree with this, but the best I can come up with is the little Jamaican friend for quite a bit of the film does look like Preston Garvey because of the hat with the blue ribbon on it. Whatever. But, well, yeah.
So they go off to this island that,
Crab Key.
They have figured out that the original MI6 agent was investigating.
Getting radioactive pyrite.
Sure. Whatever.
I totally... So, I haven't seen this film. I knew nothing about this film. What I expected to be happening when they were talking about, oh, he brought me some worthless stones. They were just pyrite. I was like, oh, okay, so there's a gold mine on the island. Which, by the way, doesn't make sense on Key Islands because they're coral-based, but we'll ignore that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought this was going to be there was a gold mine, and then it turns out they're radioactive. it also could be because we were just having a good time with this film, but I didn't see where he got the samples from. Because remember, the geologist says, I threw out his samples. Did he like go and raid the geologist's trash? And like, was there a throwaway line about that?
No.
I don't remember. He just has them.
No, he never has the samples. He just orders a Geiger counter.
He does have a sample.
Does he have the samples?
He has the samples while he's in a boat. He's in the boat with the Jamaican dude.
Oh yeah,
that's
because he's a Geiger counter with the radio.
He's like, look,
yeah,
it goes off with my watch.
I don't think they ever show that.
Yeah,
and they never really explain why he just asks for a Geiger counter.
Yeah, that's not made clear. But
anyway, that's where it comes from. So they go to the island, and then Bond like
infested with dragons.
Oh yeah, that's apparently a really big thing. They just keep setting up that there's a dragon on the island.
Yeah.
It's a local superstition that was started by Dr. No.
Yeah. Which, like, really? Really?
Yeah, it just comes off awkward. They go to the island, and then Bond meets Honey Rider.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Her name is Honey Rider.
Her name is Honey Rider, and it's a great goddamn name.
Oh, God, it's like Pussy Galore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always thought Pussy Galore was, like, something subtle and didn't mean what we all think it means.
Nope, it means exactly what we all think it means. Honey Rider, played by the incomparable Ursula Andress in the bikini suit, and then they start hanging out on the beach, and then the Jamaican guy who you forgot was there because
he's third wheeling it
because you were totally blown away by Ursula Andress showing up on screen. Runs up and says,
we got company.
Yeah, we got company, basically.
Inbound.
Yeah.
Hostiles. But you're forgetting about my intentions are honorable.
Oh, yeah, he does. Bond does say, I assure you my intentions are honorable, or something like
something
that.
Very
to
similar,
this
yeah.
woman who is alone on an island in Jamaica wearing a bikini. Because only Bond has to say that.
And she puts away her knife. She's like,
good. Oh yeah, that's good. She just shakes it off like, yep, that's good enough for me. And then he goes, what's your name, all creepy like? He's like standing at her shoulder, and she just tells him.
And he even finds it funny. And he's like, oh, it's a beautiful name.
Yeah. And then she just shrugs that off too, like, that's not weird. So they get shot at a little bit.
Yeah.
And then they are like, Honey Rider says, like, I know a place to hide.
Yeah, basically said they're coming back with dogs.
Yeah. She says, there's a place to hide on the interior island, so they start walking up the river.
No, you're missing a critical point. Bond has to ask his Jamaican friend to go get his shoes. Why? Why was that critical to anything?
And you don't actually know where his shoes were, but it only takes about 30 seconds of screen time for him to go off screen, get the shoes, and come back.
Yeah. Like, what? Like, if it were set up like he wanted to, like, smooch with the girl or something like that, you know, go get my shoes. But no,
he just says, go get my shoes because I'm going to need them when we're walking to the interior of this island. But then he doesn't put them on right away. He starts walking up the river barefoot. Like, very obviously doesn't have his shoes on.
Oh, God.
Anyway, so they're walking up the river, and then the people with the dogs catch up to them.
Put the dogs in the water.
Right, they put the dogs in the water. They cut bamboo stalks so they can breathe out of them. Pretty classic hide and seek trope in there. I don't know if this is the first movie that ever did that, but
no, I've definitely seen black and white films that have done that.
It can't have been, but yeah, pretty classic. Then again, like, the dog is like right on top of them, and Bond getting lucky again. This like flock of pigeons just gets startled out of the brush, and they're all like, "Oh, everybody look over there!" And they all run away.
Flock of seagulls.
No, it wasn't seagulls. They were clearly pigeons.
Sorry. Yeah. It's just it continues that trend of Bond just stumbling into good luck.
He's not good at being a spy. He's just lucky and smooth.
We also forgot Spider in his bed.
Oh yeah, they tried to poison him with a tarantula of some kind.
Yeah.
They never actually say what kind of spider it is. They just show a spider in a cage.
And imply that it's deadly.
And they never show the guy putting the spider in the room. It's just there.
I also want to point out, did they ever like make a big deal about him putting the hair across the closet?
Yeah.
Like, he did that. He put the hair across the closet door. did that ever come back and we just didn't notice, or...
I sure didn't notice.
Because, see, I think that would have been cool if, like, the hair was gone. And so he opens the door, looks around.
Right.
And
I didn't notice.
That's the clue that the spider's in the room already. Instead, spider in the room.
Right, there's just spider in the room.
They didn't even use an assassin droid.
Right. They didn't use an assassin droid.
I gotta reference episode 2. The best one, right?
Is that episode 2? Yeah, you're right, it is.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, yeah, blah, blah, blah. They keep going up. Then it's nighttime. They're in a swamp, apparently, because this island is massive.
It is massive. But remember, they find treads, and they're like, these are dragon tracks.
Oh, yeah, they're dragon tracks.
At which point, I made a reference that I adore, which I hope some of you out there can get it. They came to the island expecting a dragon, and they found a crocodile.
Stop.
For those of you who don't know...
Nobody gets it, Patrick.
For those of you who don't know, during World War II, there were flamethrower-equipped Shermans called crocodiles. And so I was totally expecting just a tank with a flamethrower at this point.
Which more or less is what happened.
Which is
so they're walking into the swamp, and there is this tank-like object that clearly has treads, and it's shooting flamethrower, and
for no apparent reason at first.
Right.
It's just flamethrower.
Yeah, they're clearly looking for Bond and Honey Rider and the Jamaican friend, but they have no idea where they are. But then Bond gets this great idea to start shooting at it.
Let's shoot at the armored vehicle with our severely underpowered firearms.
Right. And Bond's like trying to shoot out the lights or something, and he gets one of them, but not the other one. And then Jamaican friend gets burned by the gets killed by the flamethrower.
Indeed, Jamaican McThird Wheel.
Yeah.
Gets crispified.
And then Bond gets captured. Bond and Honey Rider get captured, and another great little thing about that was they take Honey Rider's dive knife away and then find her so much less of a threat than Bond that not only do they not handcuff her, they don't even try to bring her with them.
She just kind of comes.
They just start dragging Bond, and she starts trying to, like, prevent them, and the guy just kind of walks through her, like, doesn't care at all. And then it, like... The scene cuts, and the next thing they show you is them being walked into this facility together.
They didn't even care about her having the knife at first. It wasn't until she started trying to free Bond that they
the guy says, "Give me your knife," and just takes it away from her in, like, one motion, and then...
Oh, the best part, at least to me out of that scene, is the guy takes a submachine gun and, like... puts it through Bond's hand, and we think he's going to start carrying him by it, but ends up just pulling him by it.
Yeah, he just pulls him by it.
It's actually kind of clever, but whatever.
So then they go through this really lengthy scene where it's like them being decontaminated of radiation. And the best part about this scene is that having been captured by these people who have a flamethrower tank and all these machine guns and are clearly hostile, Bond starts giving orders to everybody in the room.
They're like, you didn't get contaminated enough by us throwing soap on you. So they put him in a shower room and they just throw soap on him, scrub him with a brush, and go, "You're good to go."
But so they go through this really lengthy decontamination process, and, like, I'm sitting there the whole time wondering, like, why is this scene here? Like, what is the point? And I think what they were just trying to do is hammer home the radiation thing, because that, like, kind of is the major turning point in the movie. Well, later on.
Two things. I do want to point out that after they do the radiation scrub that doesn't work, Bond says, "Do the girl first," which I just thought was a funny line.
They said, "Take off your clothes," and Bond says, "Do the girl first."
Yeah.
And then starts yelling at some guy to take his handcuffs off so that he can take his shirt off, because everybody knows you can't take your shirt off if you're handcuffed.
No, I just figured they would have cut it off him because, again, it's all contaminated with radiation.
And you do see them throwing it in an incinerator. You see them throwing their clothes in an incinerator. Like, who cares, right? But, like, Bond is like, "Here, you," and points to somebody off screen, and then takes, like, 5 steps to get his hand. And the people just listen. There's even a guy that says something like, "You don't give the orders," or "We give the orders here," and Bond just completely ignores him, keeps doing it anyway. Because that's James Bond.
Yeah. So, they go through that decontamination sequence, which really reminded me of the show LAX.
Sure.
In the first episode of LAX, they have... Do you remember LAX at all?
No, not at all.
It was a show about LAX.
Fair enough.
Okay. There's a scene where they have to go through decontamination, and it's supposed to be like this romantic kind of scene between two of the leads. And it kind of reminded me of that. Like, I don't know. It seemed unnecessary how long the decontamination was. Also, thing I found weird was like, wouldn't you just shower longer? Why do you have to go through multiple showers?
Yeah, they're like on a conveyor belt of showers, and there's nothing visually different about any of them.
And
anyway,
they make a point about his fingernails being dirty.
Yeah, I do. Just the weirdest details. So then they're put in a room, and drugged, which is a great scene because Bond is like pouring coffee or whatever it is into these mugs or teacups or something, and pretty obviously like is waiting for Honey Rider to drink the thing first.
Yeah, he hands her the cup and he waits and he watches her.
It's pretty obvious spycraft, like, here, you drink, here, unsuspecting person, you drink this first, I'll see if it's okay. And then he just starts drinking it anyway, and they both end up drugged, and he smashes the cup on the ground.
Yeah, he's like, darn the coffee. So then we have, like, Dr. No tucking Bond in.
Well, but he's sort of like untucking him because, like, so you see Bond in a bed. It's clearly later he's been moved there. Yeah. And you don't know that it's Dr. No, but, like, it's kind of obvious. You'd see him from, like, the waist down, basically. You see his hands that are, like, gloved in, like, black latex. And they look kind of weird, but you don't know why. But Bond is laying in the bed, the sheet is like kind of covering his face, and Dr. No like takes it down off his face and leaves it on his chest. He's kind of like untucking him a little bit.
He lifts it up for a while
to like look at his face. It's weird.
Looks, longingly at Bond's face,
and then just walks away.
Dr. No, the third Bond girl.
Yeah, exactly. Probably like fourth Bond girl at this point of the movie.
Indeed.
Then there's, of course, the typical scene where the bad guy has clothes that fit the good guy that they've captured, their nemesis, and the girl that he brought with him, which is funny.
They make a point like, oh, it won't fit you, but it does.
Yeah, it clearly is tailored for Sean Connery.
Yeah.
So then they go have dinner with Dr. No, and you actually see Dr. No for the first time. And they talk, and typical bad guy giving up the goat kind of thing. Then Bond gets beat up for no reason.
Well, I do want to point out, it's at this point the film becomes very nicely maybe progressive. I love that the comment that the guy makes, the reason I am evil is because I'm half American and half Chinese.
Right, like, yeah, pretty much, yeah. Which in the 60s is like, okay, but then like you put that in today's context, it's like, a little bit. Yeah, anyway. So then you see Bond in a cell, he breaks out of the cell.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if the cell's grating was supposed to be electrocuted, or if it was just bad wiring.
No, it was like supposed to be electrocuted, but then he burns it out when he touches it the first time, and then he puts his shoe on his hand and hits it, and it's no longer electrocuted, but he keeps hitting it with the shoe on his hand anyway.
I do want to point out something here that I'm reading way too much into. Much as Bond at the beginning of the film finds salvation through the barrel of a gun with the spirals of the rifling, Bond finds his way out of this situation through the spirals of the air ducts.
Yeah, the ventilation, the double wide man-sized ventilation shafts.
I just found it a visually similar shot, and I do want to go back to, my God, dear God, man, the beginning of this film, the traditional Bond opening, is so amateurish by today's standards.
Yeah.
Like, two things. One,
and they've kept using it.
No. I don't mean the concept. The concept is good. I mean, it looks like a student at an art school going, oh my God, I have special effects on my computer. Yeah, throw everything at it.
The blood drifting down looks real bad.
No, I meant the way they do the silhouettes of the girls. Like, I don't know how to describe it other than amateurish, but the thing about it is that was probably pretty technically hard to do at the time.
Oh yeah, when they're doing like all the
Silhouettes of
credits with the
Yeah.
at the beginning, yeah, that too. But the
blood,
is
yeah.
that's pretty bad by today's standards.
But yeah, you can
So
see where
then-
the Bond silhouette girls come from. But
Yeah. So then Bond gets out of the ventilation shaft after like an extremely long scene of
With
him just
random
crawling
water.
through. Yeah, there's just water that gets put on him for no reason. Also, they make a really big deal about the ventilation shaft being hot and him having to take off his jacket so you
Yeah.
can see his ripped shirt.
and they did the steam. all
Yeah,
that jazz.
it was just unnecessary. But he busts out and then, again, classic, like, Bond, beats up a guy and takes his place.
Yeah, he just
in
takes his
the-
radiation suit.
His radiation suit so no one can tell it's him. Goes in the room where they're, like, trying to shoot down the American rocket or whatever.
Yeah, it's never made clear. We are going to use radiation to stop the Mercury program.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How?
I
What?
don't say. But then he's just like standing there for a while listening, and then they tell him to go do his thing, and it just so happens that the position he's supposed to be in is the big wheel that controls how much radiation is happening.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, turn it up, and he just keeps turning the wheel, and then Dr. No is like, oh, hey, you stop that, and they fight really cornily. Bond gets the upper hand. It's a hand joke because Dr. No doesn't have real hands.
Yes. Let's laugh at the cripple.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And beats him up, and then like this thing that they're on is lowering into the radioactive steaming water, and Dr. No can't climb because he has no hands.
Yeah.
And then
I
the whole
didn't-
place, so nuclear meltdown happens.
I really want to talk about this Dr. No fight. Why the hell is Dr. No fighting?
Listen,
Why?
man.
Okay? Why? 2. How the hell does Dr. No lose? Like, Dr. No should lose because of Bond's luck, not because of Bond's skill. It's proven that Dr. No has, like, these ridiculously strong hands. Dr. No should, like, be crushing pipes and smashing things, you know, and then slip on a banana peel and fall to his doom. Thirdly, I could not believe that that's how he just ends.
Yeah, that's just how Dr. No. That's the last you see of Dr. No. That's he's off
Yeah,
screen
he
at
dissolves.
this point. He just dissolves in this. Well, you never actually see it. He just goes underwater, but there's a lot of steam. You never see what happens.
This is true.
And Bond starts running away and like accosts a secretary and says, "Where's the girl?" or something, and she knows exactly who he's talking about.
He grabs a guy, asks him, "Do you know where she is?" He says, "No." So he punches her, or punches him. And then he grabs the woman and says, "Do you know where she is?" And she says, "Yes." And I so wanted Bond to just go punch and just do the same thing to her, even though she gave him the answer he wanted. Because then the next person he meets, he just does the same punch. And it's the same motion. It's great. It's great.
In the room, the guy who is guarding Honey
Yeah.
Ryder, watching her slowly drown in this pool where apparently the
Yeah.
water was supposed to be rising, but you never see it.
At this point, I do want to make the comment, our hero, our James Bond, decides it's better to set off a nuclear
Yeah,
chaos event
Yeah.
in the middle of Jamaica,
Yes.
rather than have a single missile blow up on a pad. I'm sorry, even if all the Mercury astronauts die, I'm sure they would gladly give their lives as United States Air Force people to save the
entirety
thousands of Jamaica.
I mean,
Oh,
it's Bond though, man. So then he gets Honey Ryder. They make their escape in the boat. Their boat that they brought that no one who is leaving this giant blowing up oil rig mine thing
and
decides to take.
the jumps are beautiful. There's one person who does a proper dive, but it looks like he's trying to dive into a boat. And I'm thinking to myself, what happens if you
happens
accomplish
if you
your
make-
goal?
Yeah, what happens when you make that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bunch of scenes of people jumping off this thing, and they're all horrible divers. and then Bond and Honey Rider make it onto their boat, and then there's a scene where they've run out of gas, and they apparently have sex, and then Felix Leiter shows up with this boat full of U.S. Marines.
But they are flying the Royal Ensign.
They are.
So there is that.
And they start towing him, and then they start having sex again, and Bond lets the rope go, and they just start drifting in the ocean, and that's how the movie ends.
Yep, with the little boat bobbing.
The little boat bobbing, and it says "the end" on either side of it, and it's just like, there's no resolution at all. Like, how did they get back to Jamaica?
Did this really stop Dr. No? What was Dr. No's plan? Who is Spectre? Like,
right, okay, so that actually is sort of important. So Dr. No does introduce Spectre, which anybody who's seen any Bond film knows is like
can you do the acronym?
The bad game. Yeah, he says what the acronym
can you
is.
do it?
I don't know what it is. Not off the top of my head. But Spectre is like the overarching like bad guy group. It's all the evil masterminds in the world doing their evil mastermind thing. And Dr. No does make a point of introducing that he is part of that, and the reason he's doing what he's doing is to further the ends and goals of Spectre. It never really goes beyond that, but the next like 5 Bond films are pretty much all about that. Like Spectre is the God, this is gonna be awful to say. Spectre is the specter hanging over all the conflict in the next couple Bond films. So, and is the name of the most recent Bond film?
It's one of them.
I think it's the most recent one as of this podcast.
Special Executive Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Exhortation.
Fair enough. Yeah, they get way more into Spectre in the next couple of movies. Where
it's
Bond
the
is
2015 film. If that matters.
Yeah, that's the most recent one.
Really? There hasn't been a Bond film in 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not out of the ordinary.
I suppose.
There's 3 years in between Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. And 3 years in between Quantum of Solace and Skyfall.
Okay.
See,
Spectre
know these things. Spectre Fall. That's... I mean, I don't have anything else to say about it, do you?
No, I actually think this is really good. This is going to be the longest after action.
Well, it's the longest movie, so...
Well, that's true. That is true. So...
Oh, we didn't talk about the martini thing.
Oh, yeah.
The famous Bond martini. Shaken, not stirred. But Bond says shaken, not stirred in the famous version of it. It's that when this scene first happened, you turned to me and said tea, Earl Grey, hot.
Exactly.
Right, because Patrick Stewart never actually says that.
Until it had already become a thing way later. I actually don't think he says it until the movies.
Right, so in this film, Sean Connery never says martini shaken, not stirred. He's given one in the middle of the film, and the man says mixed, not stirred like you asked. And then Dr. No gives him one later when he says that's the first mention of shaken, not stirred. But Bond never actually says it. And I can't remember when the first time it is that Bond says it, but I want to say that it was a Roger Moore film.
Well,
I don't think Sean Connery ever said it.
I do also want to point out that he never orders a martini. They're just given to him.
Yeah, they're just given to him. He never orders one.
I don't think he orders anything ever.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, just things happen to Bond.
Things just happen to Bond.
He just kind of drifts.
Yeah, he's just like there's only one thing in this movie that would not have happened without him being there, and that's the meltdown, the nuclear meltdown at the end of the movie. Like, he directly causes that, obviously, but
he also causes the woman to get captured.
Right. But everything else in the film
just kind of happens.
It just kind of happens, and Bond is just sort of there. You know what's funny is
he's a leaf on the wind.
We both said watch this movie at the beginning, and then just proceeded to pretty much make fun of it for the rest of the analysis. But that's the thing about the Bond films. Okay, this is my biggest thing. We're going to go through all the Bond films, and I'm going to say this every single time. The Bond books And the original Bond movies, everything from Dr. No until Roger Moore stopped being in the Bond films, were very tongue-in-cheek. They're lighthearted. They are not action films. They are specifically not action films as we know them today. Bond is supposed to be this suave, like, cheeky character who just is a womanizer, but no one cares because, like, it was the 60s and that was a thing that was seen as, like, okay to be. And, like, even Roger Moore in the 70s, same thing.
He's not rapey.
Like, right, he's not. He's just really smooth and is, you know, the archetypal man. He's everything that every man is supposed to want to be and every woman wants to be with. He
is Sean Connery.
Right, he is Sean Connery, exactly.
Have you heard that whole theory about why Sean Connery chose to be in Bond? There's this theory that Sean Connery has this god complex where he sees himself as Bond. And so he only picks roles where he is always in command, always in control, and he doesn't put on an act. That's just Sean Connery.
That's just Sean Connery being Sean Connery. I would love to believe that. That's hilarious. Anyway, like, that's the thing about these movies is, like, they're supposed to be like that, and they're going to get progressively darker, and I think it's why people think that Sean Connery is the best Bond. Not just because he was first, but because he played Bond the way Bond was meant to be played. And the character was written the way that it was meant to be written. That's the other thing, is, like, the writing is going to get a lot darker. The production is going to get a lot darker in terms of, like, the colors that they use and the lighting that they use, especially in the Daniel Craig films. Everything is super dark.
I want to say this. I left this film feeling happy.
Yeah. It's a feel-good movie.
I don't get that feeling from a lot of films in general, and definitely not the Bond films I've seen. Bond wins, yes, but it's always at such a cost that it sucks.
It's a Pyrrhic victory.
Yeah. Like, in this film, except for Jamaican McThird Wheel, none of the good guys die.
Right.
Like, okay, we do lose a spy and, I guess 2 spies at the beginning of the film. But, like, we don't know them, we don't care about them. Sure, you feel bad for them, but whatever. Other than that, we only have one death of a character you actually care about or know. Right.
And it's Jamaican McThird Wheel, who is now who we are calling every third wheel character in the entire rest of the Bond. He's short rounded. Okie dokie, Dr. Jones. Like, he's Jamaican McThird Wheel. That's a thing we are using. That is a new theme for this podcast. We're gonna do it every time.
And it's always Jamaican.
And it's always Jamaican McThird Wheel, and you will have to have listened to this podcast to understand the reference.
Well, I'll see if I can get Chris to do another one of these tonight. If not, we'll be doing another one soon. So, until next time, listeners, see you out there.